When we first give consent to a platform to utilize or collect our data, it might be for a different purpose. And later on, as time evolves, it might be utilized for a different purpose. Do we provide consent for the company to collect our data in a specific manner? Do we know how long our data is going to be stored? If it is stored, is it used for training? If it's not used for training, is it used for validation? If it's neither used for training nor validation, then what are they storing it for? If they're storing it, do I have a right to request for it to be deleted? And if they do delete, how do I know that it has truly been done? Or if I want a copy of it, can I get it? These are questions as a user, as a responsible user in the age of AI, we need to start thinking about. Because what are we giving away in exchange for some of these services, and how are we utilizing and protecting our own data rights is also super critical.
Welcome to the Work for Humans podcast. This is Dart Lindsley. Today, I am talking to Emily Yang, who is the head of human-centered AI at Standard Chartered. Her work sits right at the intersection of AI, ethics, governance, and human experience. Emily's an early advocate for bringing human-centered design and responsible innovation into the heart of enterprise AI, especially in HR and in talent functions. So, we talk about ethics, but not in the abstract, because for Emily, ethics is an activity. It's something we do. It's something that's ongoing, not just something we believe. Together, we explore questions like, why is AI different from other technologies we built in terms of its ethical implications? What makes it feel at once so helpful and yet so destabilizing? And how might design be one of our best tools for shaping AI systems that make us more human, not less? We get into algorithmic bias, invisible harms, the politics of interface design, and what it means to preserve human agency when the tools we build increasingly act on our behalf. This conversation gave me a lot to think about, especially about what it means to be human in the age of AI. All right, if you enjoy this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And now, here's my conversation with Emily Yang. Emily Yang, welcome to Work for Humans.
Thanks, Dart, for having me. It's lovely to be here.
So you're the head of human-centered AI at Standard Charter, and it's brought you into a position where you are not thinking about ethics as an abstract idea in the world. You're thinking about ethics as something that we do. It's an activity. It's a practice that we integrate into how we incorporate AI into how we work. And so I really wanted to have you on the show because I want to talk about, first of all, what does that even mean? And second of all, how might we apply it to the questions related to the experience of work? So I guess I'll start by saying, what is your job, right? What does it even mean to do what you do?
I head up the human-centered AI department of work, and from my knowledge, I am likely the first, if not amongst the first, who is practicing human-centered AI in the industry at the moment. The work that I do is essentially making sure that human identity, human experience, human flourishing, and sustainability is at the heart of what we do in the age of AI. And what that means is we will operate in the intersections of AI technology, AI ethics, and its governance, as well as bringing all of the human factors. What I see at the moment is that we have 10 human factors that are impacting and impacted by the AI technology that we utilize today, and that includes generative AI. Amongst the 10, the biggest of it will be AI ethics and humanity. And there are a couple of others. The rest would include things like education, workforce, psychology or cyber psychology, culture, and also economics and sustainability, so on and so forth. In the work that I do, I often encourage my stakeholders to wear two hats. One is thinking about how can we adopt AI or generative AI to help us work better and increase our employee experience, and at the same time, making sure that in so much as possible, we are making informed decisions, and on top of that, risk management proactively. But then there's another hat that we also need to wear in the sense that we need to think about how we are able to empower the rest of the organization with our domain knowledge to adopt AI at scale and safely. So, in short, I look after the entire AI portfolio from an end to end perspective for 5 back office function, and in so much as possible, look at embedding all of the human factors into that AI lifecycle. And coming from the point of view that McKinsey always say, 30% of the AI solution is to do with technology, and then the other 70% is really to do with humans.
It's very interesting. If you ever want to know what the zeitgeist is, walk through the San Jose Mineta Airport and look at the signs. And usually what you find is the latest, probably overhyped technology and how people are spinning it. And so a little while ago, it was blockchain. Every single sign inside, and they're all digital. They're all about AI right now, and they almost all combine the word human with the word AI. AI for humans, human AI, AI with a heart. And so, what strikes me about the signal that's coming through the advertising there is that everybody sees the incredible possible value, but the human part is we're scared of it. We're scared it's going to dehumanize. We're scared that it's going to have consequences.
With I feel like just like with every story, it's more than just one actor. Humans are also a really important part of the story of AI that we're telling. And there are 3 reasons why I believe so. Because for the first time, we have a technology that is inspired by the human brain, how neurons fires, how neurons communicate with one another was the original inspiration for neural networks or the perceptron even. And when I look at the progression of Gen AI technology, they are now comparable to a lot of what we consider to be unique to human in terms of our human intelligence. And that is also one of the core reasons why I'm hypothesizing that people may feel fascinated by, but at the same time also scared of, because it can potentially go either way. And if we look at how all of these big data models or large language models are being trained, it's on our internet data most of the time. And if I look at what's on the internet data, a lot of times it's mirroring what's happening in society or societal biases, so on and so forth. So, in essence, it's almost as though we created something that is super powerful, very useful if we use it right, mirrored after us as a humanity, and scary at the same time.
Right.
Fascinating and scary.
You're right. That's a very good point. It's not necessarily that we don't trust AI, it's that we don't trust the example of ourselves that it was trained on.
A lot of these models, things like Adobe Firefly, Perplexity, are in fact a mirror of our society and the inherent biases or subconscious biases that we may have already been portraying. People must become aware of the fact that large language models, or even any language models, there is a tendency to potentially perpetuate gender plus race plus occupation related biases. They must be aware of the fact that it comes through from your training data and why is that important, so on and so forth. There needs to be a first layer of awareness of the information that's out there. And then once they're aware, it's really important to think about what does that mean for me? What does that mean in the context of how I'm utilizing this particular AI solution? And this is where I believe critical thinking is super important. And thinking about how am I interacting with the AI solution and what does that really mean? Do I have consent? Did I provide consent at an earlier phase? That now maybe it has changed. And LinkedIn is a really great example because when it started utilizing people's data on the platform to train its own models, did people receive consent once again? Were people aware? Were they given options, right?
Nobody gave consent to use personal data for AI when the data was collected before AI,
Yeah.
right? there's no way that when LinkedIn was launched and they started collecting the data that they could have asked for consent to use the data for something that didn't exist for a decade.
And this is what we meant by contextual inquiry. When we first give consent to a platform to utilize or collect our data, it might be for a different purpose. And later on, as time evolves, as technology evolves, as the company goals and mission and their feature rollout evolve, it might be utilized for a different purpose. And this is where do you come back to your users to inform them? Do you come back to users to regather their consent? It's also equally important. Do we provide consent for the company to collect our data in a specific manner? Do we know how long our data is going to be stored? If it is stored, is it used for training? If it's not used for training, is it used for validation? If it's neither used for training nor validation, then what are they storing it for? If they're storing it, do I have a right to request for it to be deleted? And if they do delete, how do I know that it has truly been done? Or if I want a copy of it, can I get it? These are questions as a user, as a responsible user in the age of AI, we need to start thinking about. Because what are we giving away in exchange for some of these services? And how are we utilizing and protecting our own data rights is also super critical moving forward. So I think it's super crucial for us to think about the longer term impacts on human with the AI solutions that we are rolling out and the AI solutions that we're interacting with, specifically from the perspective of psychology, society, as well as culture. If we're rolling out a end user facing product and people are going to utilize that product for creating new marketing advertisement related content, the first and foremost we need to ensure is that we don't erode trust. The baseline of trust our customers have with us, we have with the customers. And I think that's really crucial. The other ways to think about it is if I am writing a note to you, Dart, and we are colleagues, and this is mid-year review, and I'm writing to you a review, and I'm using Gen AI to write that to you. On my end, obviously my rationale is that it's gonna speed things up, it can help polish my language, I can look good in front of you. So I'm gonna share that forward. And that's my intention. But the thing is, we also need to be considerate how the recipient will have that information or look at that information. Is it so far deviated from my user style, my approach? Like, how do I write my feedback? Is it trying to convey what I really mean to say? Is it genuine? Because depending on the context, right, how we are utilizing Gen AI, the super critical question we need to ask ourselves is it going to have any sort of negative impact on the baseline of trust that we currently already have with one another? So I feel like on a smaller scale, especially with an individual scale, that's something that we need to be very cognizant about. I don't speak Spanish. And if I have a colleague who only speaks Spanish, and we've been trying really hard to communicate with one another, if I all of a sudden can write something in Spanish to him, maybe I'm much more quote unquote articulate from their perspective because for the first time they are able to understand what I am trying to convey. So generative AI can help improve trust because they all of a sudden understand where I'm coming from and vice versa. So the context of how we utilize Gen AI is super important, but also being very thoughtful around some of the psychosocial cultural impacts that we may have on one another to make sure that the baseline of trust that we have with each other is intact. Is something that is extremely critical.
It's interesting because you sort of named two different kinds of trust there. One is person-to-person trust, so it's P2P trust, and the other one is business-to-person trust. Most of what you're working on is back office. In other words, it's not the customer-facing part of the company, it's the back office part of the company. Does the back office have a different set of ethical considerations than the front office? Or are the concerns slightly different?
I believe the principles are the same. the context within which they're applied, they here referring to the AI solutions, the way they are applied is different, and therefore the potential risks associated may also be different, and the mitigating strategies could also be different. I believe the principles are more or less the same. They have to be universal to some extent, to be frank, because we're dealing with a common set of values and principles that would speak to majority of humanity.
Yeah. And what might be different is, although they're universals, the context might be different in, for instance, the sense of the power relationship between the two. So when you're dealing with a customer externally and you're selling shoes, you may not have power over their livelihood, for instance. But inside a company, you might. So I agree that the ethics are the same, but the context may be different enough that we have to be extra sensitive to certain things.
Yeah. And I think it's really crucial for us to continually monitor the trust factor when it comes to, do we trust ourselves to be able to use a Gen AI tooling? Do we trust the output that's produced by a generative AI tool? Do we trust that the output we are sharing across to our whoever is receiving on the other end is in fact reflective of our intent? Does the person trust what we have relayed? I think all of those are really important because we are essentially trying to make sure, in so much as possible, the tool itself is capturing the intent of what we would do. And I think this is where we don't want to lose power to some extent of our own identity as we are utilizing some of these tools, which is why a lot of people, from my perspective, is super worried that the rise of tools like ChatGPT will create over reliance. And over time, we may forego the ability to do certain skills. A speaker yesterday was sharing the fact that one of their kids was using ChatGPT to do math calculations, simple math calculations like 10 plus 3. And all of a sudden, he was very shocked and he wanted him to stop using it because ChatGPT was able to provide his child with an immediate response. But the child was no longer going through that cognitive ability to count, to rationalize how ChatGPT got there. It's almost instant gratification of finding answers. So, what do we lose in that journey of getting to answers so quickly?
It's a really important question. I think about it in the micro and I think about it in the macro, which is here's a child who doesn't develop mental math, essentially. Or we solve protein folding without having to go through all the intermediate steps and going through the throes of failure and success. And so, what did we miss on the path to solving protein folding ourselves? In prep for this, I started to look at some of the EU regulations around AI. And what I was interested in was, what are the regulations? Because a lot of the things that they are regulating they're trying to prevent use cases that in some cases may be hypothetical. And when I look at what they're regulating, they are essentially trying to regulate tyranny. They're trying to prevent AI from infringing fundamental rights, social scoring and manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
widespread biometric surveillance, which was very interesting because it included surveilling emotional states and recognizing emotional states. It was very interesting. Bias and discrimination in critical areas, lack of transparency and accountability because of the black box problem with AI, and threats to safety and health. Only the last one is one that is essentially not a societal ill. The last one is we don't want anybody to get to hurt. But the first ones are all about, it seems to me, closely related to democracy and closely related to tyranny. And so there's certain things that we regulate, that we don't allow governments to do, that we do allow companies to do. And so what the EU is regulating might not extend to the inside of companies.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I recognized in the EU's regulations is the idea that we are safe from tyranny, just because we're invisible. In other words, we're hard to see. And in fact, a lot of freedom from control comes from being illegible. I found this when I was doing a lot of this kind of work when I was at Google, which is that it was much easier to control my writing as a company than it was to control my podcasts. And the reason is the podcasts, there's just too much content there. You can't regulate it. But if I'm publishing something, especially if it's in a significant magazine, it's a finite data set. And so it's much easier to govern. And so there's a lot of things like that, which is that because it's illegible, it's hard to control. And I can see how just creating transparency and visibility can be a risk. And I see it, well, it's interesting because the way it's phrased here is lack of transparency and accountability is a concern. Like we want to know how the AI is working. But one of the other ones is widespread biometric surveillance. Why is that a problem? Because control requires visibility to what people are doing. And so your point about trust, AI makes it possible to govern without trust through control. It's a really interesting challenge, and it's a bigger challenge inside companies because it's very tempting inside a company to want to monitor everything. And even though it might be illegal to create a surveillance state in a government situation, creating one inside a company is perfectly fine.
I think this is where like having a body of counsel within the organization that looks at all of the AI use cases that are being deployed and having open discussions about them is very crucial.
So let's talk about how you actually do that. When do you bring a technology before a council? And how do you assemble the council?
Okay. Before even assembling a council, I do believe that the organization need to understand what sort of principles when it comes to AI ethics they want to look at as a common blueprint. You need to speak almost quote unquote about the same type of values, about the same type of principles. You need a starting point.
What's an example of one?
It could be data suitability. Usually, what works well is a set of principles, not just one. So it could be fairness. I think the more common ones is fairness, accountability, looking at transparency. And transparency is oftentimes interrelated to explainability because the more explainable your algorithm is, the easier it is for you to write it out and explain it to your end users or your customers or employees what's going on and provide clarity that way. So it's more about a set of principles rather than just one principle that you need to work together with. And once you have that set of principles, then what you need to do is to look at curating a body of counsel. And these are typically people with skill sets and experience in the AI and data space. The majority of them have to be in this space with the inclusion of other areas that are also really critical in the age of AI. Cybersecurity is super critical. Maybe you need to have your architecture team involved as well, because they need to see how this AI solution would fit into the entire landscape of solutions that's available within the organization. Ideally, you're also going to have your experienced teams on board because your researchers, your designers are the ones who are closest to your users and able to provide a user lens. Your legal team is also going to be a part of that council because no one is more well versed with the law amongst that group other than your legal team. And depending on the size of the organization, you may have a separate compliance team and that of people who are operationalizing the standards that is put in place, or sometimes it could be together. So your compliance folks need to be also a part of the conversation. And there you have is the base of what a council looks like. It is highly cross-functional, and it's also really important to make sure that there is diverse representation from different backgrounds.
Is this council brought together for design reviews?
the council is brought together to review AI-related risks before a product go live.
Before the product go live, potentially before product build. So we have a design doc. It's trickier with Agile because oftentimes there is no design doc before you have a product. So definitely before product launch.
Typically, product launch in the sense that it is the easiest catch point where there's enough investment being made, as well as it's a critical time point that if you miss, then you miss it. So this is where I believe governance is different from design. Governance are controls and gates and guardrails that you have to check and clear before you're able a ticket, a green light into production. And this is where I believe AI ethics and AI governance are related, but not exactly the same thing. And where I see a gap in the industry at the moment is so much of the responsible AI field is now just geared towards governance. You do this, you don't do this, you do this, you don't do this. If you do all of these things, you get a green ticket, you are out the door. If you don't do these things, you're not out of the door, you have to go back and redo it and then come back again. It's about making sure that, in so much as possible, it's abiding to a set of principles and there are checkboxes being done. The last gate review. But AI ethics, it's less about checkboxes. It's about having meaningful discussions about trade offs that product and business teams need to make about their solutions that may ultimately one day impact end users. I'm putting a lot of may one day because this is at the early stage concept. There's so many reasons that a product can fail. Technology is not mature, don't have enough funding, is not the right problem solution fit later on as you discover. But it's shifting left all of those values and principles upstream. And I feel like this is where we have a huge gap because when a company develops a set of standards and principles and values, those are like the 10 commandments that you put on a wall in the Bible you read. It's like that. It's like that's the North Star that you're supposed to go. And that in the middle, you may or may not have anything. And all of a sudden, you have a gate, a series of gates that you have to pass through right before you go into production. What's happening in between, how you do things, is ultimately how ethics is being considered, how culture has been built, how mindsets are being changed, how difficult decisions are being made, how trade offs are being discussed. The true gem is not the fact that you have quote unquote 10 commandments listed down or you have guardrails, but the journey to getting there to start. And I feel like this is where we need to translate a lot of that AI ethics principles or values into design principles and values. Because the design team, whether or not you are a product designer or a researcher, these are people who have the skills to facilitate difficult conversations around ethics, the skills to reach out to end users and bring back those insights. They're also the ones who practice empathy the most in order to uncover true user needs and make sure that the product solution has good fit to begin with. And they're also the ones who are able to translate what people are really thinking into how to communicate to them, into user stories, into designs that can help our technical teams implement. They're a crucial stakeholder in the how in that entire journey that can help empower the building of ethics as a start. So what my friend Olivia Gumbley always say, ethical by design, or how I see it, is being human-centric by design.
First of all, I think that's really compelling, which is that if you are not making all of your design decisions with ethics in mind, you can probably check the boxes at the end somehow and get through. Because the ethics of the design are probably very fine-grained, and the checkboxes at the end are sort of big, gross anatomy things. So I can see that, and I find that very appealing. So it seems like the ideal situation would be that the design team is thinking about ethics all the way through. And by the time they get to that review, they actually have the ability to say, here are the ethical considerations that we considered, and here's how we solved for each of them. It seems like that would be ideal. Like, let's not just bring it to the checkbox council without explaining the reasoning. Has that been developed into a practice, or am I making something up new?
I think it's a space that we need to be much more cognizant about because this is something that I've been observing, be it internal within my organization or other organizations, or even in some of the larger scale industry collaboration. How often do the research team, the design team, the experience team have a seat at the decision making table about AI? The question is rhetorical in a sense, because if I look at some of the major forums that people know in the world, right? Paris Summit earlier on this year in February, a number of others that we can list. You always see the lawyers there, you see the policymakers from the government there, you see technologists there, you definitely see business there. Who's advocating for the people? Who are the people who really understand people and are the closest to them? Where are they?
Right.
And they're, in fact, the ones that I believe can help the AI legal teams, the AI governance teams, the compliance team the most in making sure that the rollout of an AI solution is ethical by design.
What would you think about having somebody on the council who's an end user or a set of end users?
It's going to be really tough because for every single AI use case, the end user is different. And the council is, in fact, a set of members who are mostly consistent. Unless, of course, the product is always going to be that one user or one group of user. But how can you also say that the user is representative of everyone else's interests out there?
On Work for Humans, we've been exploring the principles of multi-sided management, which is the belief that work is a product that every company designs, builds, and delivers to employees. Along the way, people started asking how they could put these ideas into practice. So I founded the work design firm 11-fold to help your company create the kind of work that makes teams feel alive and engaged instead of dead and dull. So you can reduce turnover and build commitment. We're doing something revolutionary here. Learn more at 11fold.com. That's 11fold.com. But that's a universal design problem. And so the idea of having essentially a user-centered ethics, because with all design, you have to go out and you can't interview everybody. And so the idea of actually incorporating questions of, do you feel that your rights are infringed in some way? Or do you feel like this might cross an ethical line for you in this design as a part of the design process?
I think maybe that's something like a design ethics council or design ethics committee.
I mean, it could be focus groups. It could be, as a part of the normal design process. Some of it is that you acquire enough understanding of the user that you can build it into your decision making just because you've got a mental model of how they function. But some of it's testing. And then I don't even know how you do that, because you'd have to say, how do you feel about the fact that this particular A model was trained entirely on, because there's a lot of things that are hidden that someone may not perceive in the usability of the product.
Yep.
Is there anything that we have not covered that you'd really like to talk about?
I think what I'm really passionate about is, at this point, getting more of our user experience and research folks into the conversations around AI ethics. Because I've done a series of speaking engagements through different types of conferences in different domains for tech, for HR, and for user experience up to this point. And where I see the most enthusiasm and want to contribute and want to be a part of, and it deeply resonates with them, and they want to see a change and think about how they can help build in the change, is in fact in our user experience research and design communities. They care. And I find that extremely empowering because before I went in and shared about human-centered AI and how to think about some of these questions as a framework, a lot of them may have scattered thoughts around some of these and following their intuition. But now they see that there is more out there that they can explore and figure out how to build into what they do. And I hope that in and of itself is inspiration enough for them to try and find a new way of building human centricity into AI that comes from the perspectives of ethical design. Because to be ethical is to be human.
Yeah, I've noticed that we want to give a lot of responsibility to designers. And I think that they're passionate to have that responsibility, but it's quite challenging to give somebody as broad a set of requirements, especially because sometimes they're internally antagonistic. And so we had Don Norman on the show,
Oh, nice.
and he wrote about, in his most recent book, it was Design for Humanity. And Design for Humanity is thinking about designing for the circular economy. And so now you've got sustainability in the mix, and you've got ethics in the mix, and it's a lot of things to think about all at the same time.
Absolutely. Which is why they need to partner with people like myself to think about it with them.
Right.
I believe there's maybe a new role that we are missing in the wider ecosystem. We have data engineering, data pipeline, so on and so forth. So there exists and data quality and data protection. There exists a role called data stewardship. I believe we need AI stewardship as well. Someone who can continually think about these problems, surface it, and find the right stakeholders and relay that to. If I'm rolling out an agentic AI system, or a team is rolling out an agentic AI system that can potentially impact our contact center workers, who do I need to talk to? What are the inherent potential risks? What are potentially reputational risks? I'm thinking about it in the context of Klarna. And for, say, in Singapore, our Uber equivalent called Grab. Who do I need to talk to? What are the stakeholders that are really important to be a part of this conversation from the get go so that we do this right in so much as possible? How can we delineate what we clearly know today and what we clearly do not know? So, in other words, list out what are the known knowns, the known unknowns, so that we are much more prepared for the unknown unknowns that will come down the line in the future. Would it be involving HR to talk about what does that really mean in terms of operationalizing everything and maybe removing a good 80% of our workforce in a contact center? What does that really mean? Do we want to let them go? If we let them go, they carry precious institutional knowledge about this firm that we may not be able to gain very quickly if we hire new ones. Do we want to convey these people to a different role where their skill sets are still valuable and they can find new meaning of work? Do we need to keep people in this space because of BCP? What happens if the entire agentic AI system goes down? What is our backup plan? Do we have a backup plan? If we choose people to stay, how do we select from the current pool who to stay? And how do we make sure that it's as transparent as fair as possible? And what does that really mean for people if they have an option to stay and they have option to do something else and do something better? Which one do they want? Open questions. I think there's a lot that a potential AI steward need to do to help the organization think about these questions and find the right stakeholders together to discuss them, to make sure that whatever we are rolling out as AI solutions from a human factors perspective in so much as possible, we are taking into account people from the get-go.
It's an interesting question, right? Which is that I'm sure that AI solution that we're talking about hypothetically was funded to reduce the workforce.
Oh yeah.
And so we're already at an ethical question, which is it right to build AI solutions that unemploy people?
Some may argue that don't we have every single industrial revolution taking out certain jobs and adding in some more?
Yeah. Yeah.
On a macro scale, certainly. But I think this is where human factors become super important because this is about the unspoken but felt impact of generative AI on an individual basis.
Yeah. That's true. Have you taken a Waymo?
Oh no, not yet.
You
Should
should
I?
try it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. The second you get in the car, you're like, oh, this car knows what it's doing.
Now I'm excited. I'm gonna put a pin in it.
The very first time I got in one, I was like, you ever experience a technology where you say, this is just superior?
Yep.
And I experienced it one of the first times when Google launched its search window. Because
Yeah.
before that, everything was crap and full of ads. All of a sudden, it popped up, and I'm like, I don't know who these people are. They're probably not going to make any money, but I want to work for them. Little did I know. But that's what I felt getting in Waymo. Getting in an autonomous car, I was like, this is it. It's just better.
Yep.
I ask a few questions at the end of every show.
Okay.
And because we see work as a design problem, we see work as a product, I ask product questions.
Okay.
What job do you hire your job to do for you?
I would hire it to help me think about how can I become a better person every single day.
Is it well designed to do that job for you?
It is getting better design. I think the beauty of having a role that is so new and being one of the first, if not the first, implementing this in the industry with this title is that I get to shape this new field. And I definitely feel a huge sense of responsibility and the weight of that responsibility. And I do want to do it right. And whether or not I like it, it also puts me into a position of potentially leading in this space. And that means I have to hold myself to higher standards. I have to think about how I am going to approach some of these problems, how I am approaching difficult conversations around ethics and trade offs. How do I have those conversations with myself? How can I see more perspectives of a particular issue and what are perspectives that I'm missing? Always staying humble to hear out what others have to say, suspending my own judgment. A lot of it is about practicing human skills, and some of them don't come naturally. So, it takes work. You asked very insightful questions, Dart.
Thank you.
Was not thinking doing a self reflection type of ending.
Well, it's an interesting response, which is that your response is to make yourself. So there are a certain set of transformation offerings that people can ask for from work. And one of those transformation offerings is I want to add a new company to my resume. Another transformation offering is I want to get better at coding in Python. The transformation offering you want from work is to make yourself a better person. It's a particularly high level type of transformation. It's the type of transformation you might go to a church for, or you might go to a guru for, which is the path to becoming a better person. And you've found yourself in a position in a company where it's demanded of you. And you largely have to invent it yourself, what it means. So it's both discovery and self growth. It's a great place to be. My next question, which you sort of answered, but there might be more to it, is what does your job cost you?
It cost me my sleep. I think it's also potentially costing a piece of my soul because, like you mentioned, right, with every sort of transformation, especially internal transformation, it requires new perspectives, new connections, adaptivity to changes, and allowing things to happen before reacting to see maybe there is validity and potential value in it. I work in a space of AI, and most people will think that, oh, she's got it. That's like the hot space to be in. I have an existential crisis that started last year, hit me really hard. I never did anything like that before, where I told my boss, I have to drop everything because I have an identity crisis, an existential crisis so bad that I just need some time to stay away, go onto an island, think, and reflect and be with myself for a moment. It's hit me that hard because I feel like the type of technology we work with right now, the potential of it is both fascinating and frightening at the same time. It all comes down to how we're utilizing it for good or for bad. And it also means that what does it mean to be an atomic human? If I strip away everything that I can do, but the machine can also do, what am I left with? That makes me truly human, because for the longest time, human beings have taken pride in our intelligence. And now we have built something that is comparable to our intelligence, and according to some of the dimensions that have been listed out in the Stanford HAI index. What does that mean to be truly human? I don't have an answer at the moment, Art. I'm going through this phase of moving away from existential crisis to now existential exploration. I definitely hope that at some point I may be able to find some answers for myself. But during this phase of existential exploration, I want to learn. In so much that I'm sharing through different conferences with different audiences and organizers of these events, seeing the value that I can bring to their audience, I am also learning myself. And one of the biggest learnings that I have taken away with is the world needs more interdisciplinary connectivity. Where does that lead to? A product, a solution, a new company, a new role? I don't know yet. But I know that there is something within intersectionality, interdisciplinary, that is super core to the identity of who we are as humanity moving forward into the future. To be ethical is to be human, is also really central to who we are. What other pieces can I gather? I don't know yet. I am still on this journey. So maybe what we can do is to have a check in back with me 6 months, a year time to see where I am at in terms of this existential exploration phase and what I've gathered, and do I see more clarity. So it cost me a piece of my soul too.
It's because your job makes you look at it. If you didn't have to look at it every day, you could ignore it. It's almost like empathy burn, where you have to look at people in the hospital. The person who's in the hospital is the thing that made you valuable, right?
Yep, very well put, Art.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. It feels like an emerging field. So talking to someone who's right there on that emerging field and wrangling with it is super valuable. So the answer of what's left of us after AI that is our unique quality. I had to face this recently because I'm writing a nonfiction book proposal, and my question is, what's left of nonfiction that is distinct from what an AI could do? So I sat back and I thought about it. Here's my list of things. Don't think AI is very good at telos. It's not very good at why. It's not very good at understanding the human purpose of things, because why and purpose is human purpose. So anytime you can address purpose, which I think is close to ethics, is one. The second thing is not very good at originality, and especially originality that is paradigm shifting. Because if the entire zeitgeist is in one paradigm and you're coming in with something new, the AI can't, I don't believe, generate original insight like that.
Paradigm shifts, yes.
Yeah. The third thing is, especially paradigm shifts as they relate to why, is something that's very challenging. The third thing is first-person experience. Biography is an example, especially autobiography, is an example of something where if you lace nonfiction with autobiographical detail, and especially the emotional component of it, even if an AI could fake it, it's important that a real person experienced it. So an AI might be able to fake it, but if it was a fake representation, I need to know it's a real representation when I'm reading it. Those are three.
Very interesting.
And taste. I also feel that one of the reasons why a lot of AI generated art looks like album covers from the 70s is because professional artists have good taste. And that's always something that's coming internally because taste is partially experienced emotionally by a human. What do you think? Are those reasonable?
I think they're reasonable. I think they're reasonable.
You've looked closer and nope, I don't get to keep any of those.
So one of the key things that I often share before I even start my talk is to talk about Amara's law or the Amara's effect, is that we often overestimate the impact of a technology, an emerging technology or vanguard technology in the short term, and then underestimate its impact in the longer term. And in terms of what you were sharing just now, it makes a lot of sense for the current moment. But I also have to take into consideration that the technology set that we have today with generative AI, it is constantly evolving. And maybe it will become better. Maybe it will hit a quote unquote bottleneck. I don't know yet. And I don't know if there are tangible answers out there at the moment. So I'm taking all of those into account as well. But one thing that you mentioned really struck a chord with me is around emotions. I find emotions to be something that is very distinct at the moment between us and that of the Gen AI systems out there. And the sensations of our lived experience is something that is very, at this point, very unique to who we are in our identity. And I feel like this is going to be a very interesting area. I can't even say it's a piece area because it makes me wonder, how good are we in living the lived experience? In other words, how present are we on an everyday basis? Carpe diem. How often are we very aware of where we are at, the sensations that we are going through, the breeze on our face, the sounds that we are immersed in, what we are smelling, so on and so forth, like getting in touch with our senses and being very present in where we are. Because if we're good at that, we won't be needing to go to meditation classes, practicing yoga, having retreats, going for silent retreats, which is also interesting. But it's like, it makes me wonder, how in touch are we with our emotions and sensations? And whether or not this differentiation point from that of Gen AI systems out there is A, crucial and important and valuable enough to us as living humans that we are ready to quote unquote protect it, to explore it, to talk more about it, to put money behind it, so on and so forth. And whether or not the second part is Gen AI systems in the future, in some form of manner, will start having those in their own way. And if they do, what does that mean for us? I would say it's the uniqueness everlasting.
There's two challenges there. One is, you know what humans are really good at is feeling things. And the first challenge is, no, not actually that good. You need to get better at it, right? Or you're not valuing it as much as you should, and you should spend more time with it because you're spending all your time conceptualizing things, living in your head. The second challenge is AI might develop those capabilities. Interesting. I don't know if I care if they do. I guess the answer is I think I probably would care if they were good enough at it. I care how my dog feels. So just because it's not human doesn't mean I can't care about it.
Anthropomorphism. It doesn't have to apply to just Gen AI. It has. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So imagine the autobiographical story of an AI. An autobiography of an AI. Actually, Greg Egan wrote one, and I think it's a book called Diaspora. And it starts off with the arrival of consciousness for an AI. And then it follows that AI through its life from consciousness to later. That book gave me hallucinations for like 3 days. And I won't give away the book, but none of his books are easy. And that's not an easy one. But it is an autobiography, essentially, of an AI.
Very interesting.
And I found it, well, I mean, it was a human writing an autobiography of an AI. But if it had been done by the AI, I would have felt the same way, I think, which was distressed,
Yep. I suppose I would be too. I feel like this is at the beginning of like, yep, this is where I go into an existential
Uh-oh,
conversation.
here it is. Here it goes. Exactly. Well, there's the other thing is there's an ego adjustment that needs to happen, which is we're not the best chess players in the universe
Yeah,
anymore.
totally.
And that would be a problem if I was ever any good. But that's exactly it, which is that there are things that we do think we're good at work. There are things that we think we're good at work. And some of our self-worth is associated to that. And we may find out that we are not as good as we thought.
Which is why I kept on saying, right, the unspoken but felt impact of generative AI in the modern workplace is the fact that it hits every single level of that Maslow hierarchy of needs. If you don't have a role, for instance, it's much easier to think about how do I put food on the table? Will I have a roof over my head? And if you don't have quote unquote a job, it's like, how do I find my sense of belonging? But if you look at higher levels up, will I ever be able to find self actualization again? How do I find joy at work? What I thought I was really good at, now ChatGPT or other Gen AI is even better than I am. And I have such a strong attachment to that in terms of craftsmanship. What am I left to do? And I think this is also where, like in the recent UX 360 conference, where people were showcasing the potential power of Gen AI powered user researcher for the products like Yasna.ai and the like, right? User researchers were both taken aback and fascinated by it because it's able to conduct conversations with an end user, which is typically what user researchers do, and gather those insights. And now the Gen AI behind it can analyze those insights. So it's like, I thought I was a long way from quote unquote being, displaced. Now it is very much in my face. And apparently people are using what Gen AI has produced in terms of this Yasna and the like. And they have rolled out products in production. So, hello, I'm still here. I'm right here. I'm listening to it. It's like that sense, right? Of when you have it in your face, you are forced to face it straight on. So it goes back to what you were saying earlier on, is like empathy burn. I have an existential crisis because I see this and think about this every single day as a part of my work, but also as a part of me setting up this new discipline for the industry. And if I'm not doing so and I'm farther away, maybe I can quote unquote ignore it until I am forced to face it. And then there might be a reality check of sorts.
Where can people learn more about you and your work?
First and foremost, thank you so much, Dart, for having this conversation with me and letting me share about human-centered AI. Where can people learn more about me? Reach out to me on LinkedIn. That might be the most effective ways of all ways at the moment. I do intend to write out more in the coming quarters.
All right. Thank you.
Super cool, Dart. Love the conversations that we have. It's been such a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Work for Humans. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And share the show with one person you think would get value from it. Believe it or not, this really helps us grow the show and reach more people who want to build the kind of work that people really want. As always, thank you to my producer Jason Ames at Ninth Path Audio for his insights into content and his high standard for quality. Final note, the opinions shared here are my own and not the views of Google or Cisco Systems. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.